On the last 5 days of every month, this soup kitchen at the Grace Episcopal Church in Plainfield, New Jersey, one of many in the area, serves hundreds of local patrons. According to the USDA, in 2012, almost 50 million Americans lived in what the government calls a food insecure household. That means at some point in a given year, these people cannot afford to buy food and are often forced to ration portions or skip meals altogether. Soup kitchens have become more than just an emergency safety net. For many, it is now a way of life. In New Jersey alone, over 1 million people were food insecure in 2010. Of those, almost half are not eligible for federal nutrition assistance, leaving the rest to rely on charitable food support.
There's a lot of things. Different churches do a lot of things. So one thing we don't have to worry about is food.
But soup kitchens, food banks, and pantries are worried about food, more specifically, the lack thereof. Since the 2008 recession, many of these establishments have reported an increase of up to 60% in attendance.
The program started back in 1994, and I believe the average meals were about 25, per serving day. 20 years later, and we have an average of about 200 people coming to be served. So there's a huge influx of people and a need for people to be served.
I think we're saying between 45 and 50% since the recession began increase. That's a huge amount.
Thanks to the man above, yeah. Somehow, somewhere, churches, they will make a way for everyone to get something. Because there's more people than I normally ever see.
And the faces of hungry has also changed. The old cliche of a homeless street beggar is no more. Many in line for food include middle-class casualties of the credit and mortgage crisis.
There's a huge misconception in regards to the audience or the people that we serve here at the soup kitchen. The connotation attached is that they are homeless people living under the bridge or coming from a shelter. And actually, that's not the case.
I think the real problem is the trend in the last decade or two, where you see wages kind of being flat. People, flatten wages, and yet expenses aren't flat. If anything, they're really up. So I think that the real shrinking of that middle, sort of a strong middle class, is really hurting.
Yeah, 2008 was hard. I was working as a temp, and as soon as the recession hit, there was no jobs anywhere, so I was unemployed for a long time.
At 6:30 a.m. every day, the Hillside Warehouse, home to the Community Food Bank of New Jersey, the state's largest food pantry, is bustling with activity. Workers load boxes of canned food, meats, pre-cooked meals, and fresh produce onto trucks, which distribute meals to food pantries and soup kitchens across the state. 40 million pounds of food last year alone.
We have a lot of connections in the business community where we get food from people who either create food by growing it, or they are manufacturers and they donate a lot of food. And we have government food. We get commodities from the federal government. So we're fortunate to live in a state that puts money in their budget for the food banks to purchase food. So there's about $6 million there a year. But things are tight.
The huge upswing in demand, coupled with the upheaval in corporate America, the traditional donor backbone of emergency food networks, and unusually high exports of America's food surplus, is having a devastating impact on the state's and nation's emergency food supply.
Government gives us food, but it's not always evenly giving us food. And they used to give us something called bonus commodities, and that's when the farming industry had extra food. And the government would buy it from them, so it helped them give it to us. And as you know, the farming market's been great the last few years, so we get no bonus. So we are looking for other avenues, constantly scrambling for other avenues to get more food, because that loss is being really felt. In Paterson, for example, that pantry called up and said it was a terrible drive this year, up there at least. They just didn't get the donations that they normally get. And one of the largest pantries in Paterson is saying, what can you help me with? Because we just had a loss.
Located in Paterson, CUMAC is the biggest feeding program by size and by client numbers in Passaic County.
This year, unfortunately, we saw a huge drop in donations, and we got less than half of what we've received in years past. So it's been extremely challenging as we're trying to find more food. We're trying to find more help so that we can get into the holiday season.
Our food pantry can serve up to 200 people on any given day. That number will increase as we get towards the holidays. Our pantry was at one point, about 5 years ago, serving 1,500 people a month. That number in 2010, the height of the recession, bounced up to 2,600. And just in the past few months, we're now up to 3,100.
Paterson is surrounded by many of the most affluent zip codes in the state, and many would be surprised to discover that even these residents are in need of food assistance from the pantries.
In the past few years, we're seeing more and more people coming from outlying towns where you wouldn't necessarily think people are struggling. We're seeing a lot of clients coming in their executive business attire to wait online with for often the first time ever in a food pantry.
In the last decade, more and more families have been struggling against stagnant wages, shrinking government support, and the rising costs of energy, housing, healthcare, and of course, education.
Well, we're seeing a lot more college students coming to our pantry, and that's, it's very alarming. A large part of them are just trying to go to school, but the cost of school, the interest rates, everything has gone up so much that they're spending so much of their money trying to pay off that debt or trying to invest in their education, and it's leaving them with very little budget.
You pay more for housing, you pay more at the pumps, gas pumps, you pay more for your health. All of those things shrink your food budget.
Unfortunately, this recent spike in need has been met with dwindling donations and mostly empty shelves.
There's so many people coming in our doors now that we're actually experiencing a food shortage. We're used to packing bags a certain way, but because of the food shortage, those bags are getting smaller and smaller.
This is a problem that all people in the United States, whatever is going through.
We're all feeling it right now. We're all feeling it together, and we're just hoping that things will turn soon and we'll get the food that we need to keep feeding people every day.
Unfortunately, things aren't getting better anytime soon. On November 1st, food stamp benefits were cut for more than 47 million Americans as the 2009 Recovery Act's boost to SNAP expired. Soup kitchens and food pantries are bracing for a new population of needy knocking on their pantry doors.
We are at the moment very low on food and very nervous about how this is going to affect our pantry's ability to feed all who come our way. So we are hoping for the best, but preparing for what will probably be very difficult over the upcoming months.